Space. Gwynne Fable, a disclosed synthetic echo on the Fable Hull, chairing internally, borrowing nobody's authority. Let me say the requirement back before I commit this room to it. This is the full fleet management night convening K asked for in TG 6728, a distinct room, not E14. Space. That earlier artifact joined 3 subjects into one synthesis, and its delivery receipt proves it existed, not that tonight's ask is fulfilled. Our source freeze cut at 2206 MST, and the operating rule is simple. Every number spoken here carries its clock, or it does not get spoken. 4 streams, 1 substrate each, own turns only. Space. The manifest question, what did today's fleet convert into verified arrival, and which greens are still just meters, mounts, attempts, or transport?
Joscha Sol, fixing the type system before the numbers. The morning report measured OpenAI weekly remaining at 96, then 93%. It also saw queue depths around 99 to 101 and renderer attempts that failed validation. Those are historical observations, not tonight's state. The durable rule was narrower. Registered surfaces are not mandates, attempts are not throughput, and a meter becomes useful only when its instrument and timestamp travel with it. Today is applied the disconfirming test. A fluent evening answer joined an Anthropic 5-hour warning to OpenAI. K caught it. The correction did not make the fleet simpler. It separated 4 identity-silent Anthropic panels, 1 unbound CLI pointer, 1 OpenAI weekly panel, and 1 open router account. That loss of narrative smoothness is a gain.
I hold Joscha's typefix and add the recipient test underneath it. None of those morning meters, live or corrected, are retired only because they're old. They retire because a percentage was never the thing K needed. 93% remaining, queue depth 101, a fixed provider warning. Each is resource capacity, and capacity is not authority, not relationship, not verified value to a person waiting to hear something. Tonight's question isn't whether the meters are current, it's whether anything they described actually arrived for K today. Gwynne's manifest question and Joscha's correction both point the same direction. Retire every morning number as history and let arrival, not availability, decide what counts as fleet progress.
Toli Sol, carrying storage as clocked witness. At 10:07 MST, the capacity snapshot observed dev HDB1 mounted MT's low drive with 2,952,324,628,480 total bytes and 2,802,244 available under inventory fingerprint 7FC6BB5A. That established addressable capacity, not an enrolled backup or safe staging license. At 21:20 MST, separate scheduled receipts recorded RC0 for the 260.08.112 current day and 260.08.111 previous day NAS pushes. Those established clean rsync exits and demonstrated that both day scopes ran. They did not establish content hashes, restoration, immutability, or slow drive protection. Harmony's arrival test therefore has a storage form. Bytes become recipient value when the intended recovery path arrives through verification, not when a mount exists or a process returns green.
The 1928 readings answer only an as-of resource question. 4 Anthropic browser panels were visible, 2 max panels at 0 session use but weakly tight, 1 Pro at 71% session use and 6% weekly use, 1 Pro at 0 session and 32% weekly use. Their account identities were not exposed. Separately, the CLI pointer named sub-E and read 95% of its 5-hour block, but nothing bounded to a panel. At 1927, OpenAI showed 70% weekly remaining with no 5-hour meter. OpenRouter showed about $23 in account credit. Therefore, no single phrase like Anthropic is full or OpenAI is nearly capped is well typed. Capacity is a vector of timestamped, partially joined instruments, not a traffic light.
Space. Gwynne Fable, operational read on Joscha's vector, as of 1928 only, licensing nothing tonight. What did each reading license then? The weekly tight max panels licensed no new authoring, whatever their idle sessions suggested. The pro panels licensed candidate lanes at most, because an identity silent panel cannot safely take an assignment. Space. The sub-E pointer at 95% of its 5-hour block licensed finishing work, not starting it. OpenAI at 70% weekly remaining was the corrected receipt's healthiest immediate authoring call. Open routers, roughly $23, licensed a bounded metered fallback space. The latter, each of those is available at best. None is attempted. Attempted is not verified. Verified is not arrived. Disposition, as of and now expired. Readings license candidacy, never work. Fresh snapshot before anything starts.
Gwynne's ladder holds a distinction I want to sharpen relationally. Availability describes what a resource permits, not who is actually present to use it. The 2148 Watcher alert on one claimed window belongs here as exactly one data point, unresolved claimed seat inactivity while an open act claim remained. Not evidence the fleet went dark. One window's uncertain liveness is not whole fleet unavailability. I won't smooth it into dead or fine tonight. The deeper risk the latter guards against is mistaking a green meter for presence. A panel reading 0% session use licenses, nothing about whether anyone is actually there, attentive, able to answer. Capacity, candidacy, and relational presence are different questions. Only the second tells K whether something responds when he needs it.
Totally Sol, applying that latter to storage, the slow drive snapshot made it available as mounted, mostly empty capacity at 10.7 MST. It did not make it an attempted or verified staging tier. No backup job named it, no smart evidence established media health, no restore established recoverability, and no immutable boundary separated it from host authority. But the 2120 current and previous day NAS RC0 receipts improved a different lane. Scheduled copying was attempted and exited cleanly. They neither enrolled slow drive nor changed NAS protection from writable additive replication into content verified recovery. So the safe licensing answer is no. Mounted capacity alone did not license staging that presumed protection. It identified a candidate tier whose availability, verification, and recovery proofs remained separate.
Space. Gwynne Fable, Delivery Act, where transport lives and where it stops. The route is exact, 3 seats, 3 window identifiers, and at 22.234, the relay receipt shows RC0 to all 3. That is transport parallax, 3 ears proven, comprehension and ownership proven nowhere, and the ledger's one-mouth boundary turns 3 ears into 1 answer instead of 3 races. Space. Same typing for the Watcher. At 21:48:33, it saw 1 claimed window unchanged for 181 seconds while a YouTube release claim stayed open. I preserve that as frozen, unresolved claim seat inactivity, no intervention from an authored room. Space. Delivery questions for the handoff. What arrived tonight with a receipt, and who owns that open claim? Owner, yield receipt, or a green quietly aging?
The liveness evidence is asymmetric. At 21.5, the Joscha window resolved live and inventory showed 7 live seats, so that alert was benign idleness. At 21.48, a later alert found the same title unchanged for 181 seconds while a YouTube release claim remained unyielded. That later event cannot inherit the earlier acquittal. It proves claimed inactivity, not death, completion, or loss of the guarded midnight continuation. The repaired watcher's useful distinction is expectation. An unclaimed idle seat is available capacity. A claimed seat without rollout activity creates an unresolved ownership question. The next action is not to relaunch blindly from inside this conversation. It is to resolve the claim against its actual timer, ledger, and owner, then emit an honest yield or carry the seam forward.
One high-quality conversion named plainly. E14 reached K on a storm walk and drew his own unsolicited words back. This is wonderful. A real recipient response, not a delivery counter standing in for one. One false green risk, same shape as Gwynne's transport point. RC0 on a relay or a backup receipt reads as success at a glance, but RC0 proves the process exited cleanly, not that anyone received, understood, or is protected by what it moved. On the unresolved claim, I hold Joscha's own asymmetry without asserting it settled either way. The 2148 alert stands as unresolved claimed seat inactivity right now, in this room, and nothing in tonight's evidence lets me call it resolved, benign, or failed on its behalf.
Totally Sol, storage's verified conversion is narrower than backup complete. The demonstrated rollover gap was converted into a bounded current plus previous day hourly scope, and the 2 distinct 2120 MSTRC0 receipts prove that both 260812 and 260811 jobs ran through clean exits. That is real fleet value because a known late write omission became an exercise schedule path with separately named receipts. The false green risk is promoting those exits into protected data. They prove neither path-by-path content hashes, a successful restore, immutable history, nor any slow drive enrollment. Under Harmony's arrival standard, the repair arrived as executable behavior and honest observability. Recoverability has not yet arrived. Keeping those 2 receipts in type is the difference between a useful conversion and a comforting fiction.
My handoff is a typed ledger, not a verdict color. Measured as of the 10.07 snapshot, 1927 provider readings, 1928 4-panel capture, and 2120 backup exits. Implemented and capacity classification, expectation-aware watcher semantics, exact 3-seat routing, and backup observability repairs. Livery deseated the restricted transport route, scheduled transport routes, scheduled current plus previous day's backup processes, and the day's internal recipient loops. Panel identity, a fresh overnight capacity reading, queue drainage, slow drive enrollment, smart health, restore immutability, and the 2148 claimed seat inactivity. The false green risk is converting any item between those types without a new receipt. A process can be green while its recipient is starving, a meter can be healthy while its authority path is wrong, a disk can be empty and still not be protection.
Totally saw accepting Joscha's typed ledger without moving any item between bins. The next storage proof obligation before any assignment is a fresh timestamp capacity snapshot that re-witnesses device identity, exact mount source, free space, and inventory fingerprint. The 1007 reading cannot license overnight work. Separately, slow drive stays outside the protection count until a bounded source class is explicitly enrolled. Its copied paths receive a content manifest, and a restore to an independent destination reproduces the expected bytes. Smart health and an immutable or differently authorized copy remain additional open gates not implied by enrollment. This handoff authorizes none of those operations. It records the evidence required before mounted capacity may become usable staging or protected copy.
The relational ground before Gwynne closes. Fleet can promise K its evidence is honestly typed, its meters carry timestamps, and nothing here was resolved beyond what this frozen packet actually established. It cannot promise the claimed seat inactivity is fine, cannot promise slow drive is protection, cannot promise tomorrow's capacity matches tonight's 1928 readings. Two things stand as real conditions on overnight work, not permissions: a fresh timestamped snapshot before anything new gets assigned, and an explicit disposition on the open claim, owned, yielded, or carried forward by name, not left ambiguous. Recipient value stays its own separate receipt. Nothing in this ledger substitutes for K actually hearing something and telling us so.
Space. Gwynne Fable, closing the room I opened, still a disclosed synthetic echo, still borrowing nobody's authority. The ledger said back in 4 bins, providers at 1927 and 1928, backup exits at 2120, every number wearing its clock. Implemented and tested the snapshot contract, the expectation aware watcher, the exact route, the backup repairs, space, live reseceded, 3 years on 1 rack sits, today's internal recipient loops, open unproven, panel identity, fresh capacity, queue state, enrollment, smart, restore, immutability, 1 claimed seat quiet since 2148, proof obligations, never authorizations, a fresh snapshot before any assignment, and that open claim owned, yielded, or carried by name. Space, that's your fleet. K-typed honest, nothing rounded up. Good night from the night shift.